Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, folks, no matter where you are at. I want you to know that I am thrilled, I am delighted, I am excited, I am ecstatic that you're here. My name is Darryl Praill. I am one of two of the debaters today. Let me bring up the indomitable, the incredible, the often quoted, and hopefully today often debated counterpart in this argument. This is my good friend, my counterpart, Dan Disney. Dan, how you doing, lad?
I'm really good, Darryl. Really excited to dig into this debate and hopefully help a lot of salespeople.
Now, let me tell you a little about Dan, guys, okay? So if you don't know Dan, let me get this right up here. I've got his little profile here because I don't want to mess up anything. He is one of the world's leading social selling experts. And when I say that, I'm not just saying that because, I am a CMO. We tend to, bouts of exaggeration. He truly is. He's the founder of The Daily Sales. It is the most popular community for salespeople on LinkedIn. His content has reached tens of millions of people. He has an impressive audience, and I'm not making this up, of over 300,000 connections. And that grows by about 10,000 every week. He is the 16th most influential sales expert on LinkedIn, just after the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. Dan, that's pretty impressive stats, lad.
Thank you. Honestly, I am just someone who's very passionate about sales, and I've embraced the world of social media to take that to a few new levels. So hopefully stuff we can dive into a bit today.
All right, so let me kind of get into the show here. So a couple things you need to know. We're going to get some housekeeping, so let's get into some of those housekeeping slides here. All right, so first thing you need to know, a couple things. Everybody here is on listen-only mode, okay? So no big deal. That's kind of status quo. We are recording this. We had a ton of questions. Are you recording this? I can't make it. I want to share it with a coworker or a colleague. Yes, we're recording it. Within 24 hours, the email address you use to register for this event, you'll get an email with the link to this, so you can watch it on demand as you want. We do have live chat. So to the right of the actual live stream window, you should see a chat function. You can log in as a guest or using your social media connections if you want to, and you can contribute to the conversation that way. We're going to be monitoring that live chat. That is how you're going to physically both give us your feedback, ask your comments, and give us your opinions. And we thought we'd kick off the whole process. You notice I've got a big URL right here. In fact, let me just bring this up because I haven't done that. I apologize, guys. We got a big URL in the bottom right corner there. And you'll see what it says is you can go to bit.ly/poll-q-1. If you go there, we're going to be able to get your thoughts in advance prior to the conversation, the debate happening today, on who's going to win the debate. So bit.ly/poll-q-1, we have two questions. This is the first one. Who do you think's going to win? Go there, cast your vote. You won't see the results. I'm going to tell you that up front. You're just going to cast your vote. We will share those results, but you won't see it immediately. By the way, the correct answer is, Darryl, I think you're going to win. Dan, you'd agree with that sentiment, right? No.
100% no there, Darryl.
I'll be 100% no. Okay. Next thing you know, here's the format, okay? We've got a series of questions, roughly 5, give or take. Every one of us, Dan and I, will have a chance to kick it off. So I think the way we formatted this was Dan would kick off the first one, I would kick off the second, I would kick off the third, he'll kick off the fourth, and we'll figure the fifth on the fly. And then once that individual has stated their position, the other one can do the counter argument. And then we just go, head to head, and we talk over each other, and we make fun of each other. At the end of this session, you're going to get a chance to vote again. So poll number 2. And in that poll, you're going to tell us who you think won. So maybe you thought it was going to be me, but in the end, you thought it was Dan. When we send you the recording tomorrow, we will tell you what those numbers were. So that's our little bit of clickbait. If you want to find out if you were right in your voting, if you want to see a copy of the recording, open that email tomorrow when you get it. Now, a couple things here. Facts, stats, anecdotes, all fair game. So this is just as much my opinion and Dan's opinion as it is our experience and any third parties we reference. Is that a fair statement, Dan?
No, I think that's very fair.
Now, Dan and I were talking yesterday. We did a couple technology tests to make sure that this was working, and it is. It's fantastic. We both had a chance to kind of view the same debate that was put on by Mario and Gabe. Is that a fair statement there, Dan?
No, we had a good chat about it. And I think, again, look, this is a popular debate. This is a debate that's been going on for a very long time. And Gabe and Mario did a really great session where they dived into cold calling versus social. And I thought it was very good. It was very theatrical. They really got into characters for it. And I think they answered some questions. But I think there's a lot more we can hopefully answer today, which is why I'm really keen to get this up and going.
So, for context, if you don't know, I'm Canadian. I often sound American. I grew up on the U.S.-Canadian border, but I am Canadian. And we got Dan here from the U.K. You're based out of London. Is that right, Dan?
That's correct, yes.
So we have a Brit versus a Canadian. So this should be a little bit of a dry wit, a little bit of apologizing for being rude to one another. This will not be the boxing gloves you saw from Gabe and Mario. We're not going to have an umpire or a referee. That's you. You just do it right on the chat window. So that's the format. That's the sentiment. We're going to have some fun with this. We're going to have a healthy debate, and we're going to get right into it. So with that, are you ready to go, my good friend?
I am ready to go.
So any predictions here before we start? Which tactic do you think is going to be proven to be better today?
I think we're going to agree on a lot of things. I'm hoping, and there's a lot I'm going to bring to the table to sort of suggest that I think social edges ahead of cold calling now. But again, we will dig into that in a minute.
Oh, Dan, you're already getting it wrong. Okay, so a couple things going on here. As you might imagine, it's technology. I've got 3 screens in front of me. If you see me going up and down, I'm trying not to be rude. I'm trying to produce you guys a good show. Well, I'm also trying to multitask and think about what Dan's saying so I can prove that he's wrong, and you guys will know that he's wrong, and life will be grand. Okay, so that's which tactic is better. Dan, I got to tell you, before we get into it, I've done my research. I've got lots of stats and facts. Now, hopefully you've done the same thing, but if not, well, that should be interesting. First one up. All right, so, and you have to understand, okay, guys, so these questions came from effectively you. When we were talking about this all began with a blog post and a response, counter answer, and boom, we said, let's have a debate. And we had, oh my gosh, we had a lot of views and a lot of likes and a lot of opinions expressed. So we've kind of synthesized the comments that you've given us to put forward as the arguing points. So these are really hopefully reflective of you. First one, Dan, you've said it. I think your exact quote is, cold calling will be dead by the year 2025 is one of your famous statements. I heard it recently in one of the podcasts that we all follow. But, you know, I've also heard you say it's not dead. So the statement on up for debate, cold calling is dead. What is your position, Dan?
Okay, so I think you're right. I've put out content, and when I said it would die by 2020, that's pretty much where I stand. It's not dead now, but I do think it's dying. I think there are a lot of signs, both in the sales results being generated by it and also changes in trends for buyers and decision makers that really highlight it's a very unconfident future for cold calling. I mean, look, there was a great, we're going to bounce some stats back to and fro, and I'd like to put it out now. You know, just because I say a stat doesn't mean I sit here and think it's 100% true. Stats are always debatable, but they give us insight. And Inside View have recently found that 90% of decision makers won't respond to cold calls. 90%. And actually, when you align that up to the sort of stats you get from cold calling success, that does sound quite accurate. It's not a great activity for generating high results. And I think what we're starting to see is more digital prospecting methods generating greater results. So in my opinion, it's just going to be a changing of tide. You know, we're riding a wave of cold calling. It's an old style. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows how to teach it, to do it. It's very easy to measure. So it's a very common activity. And I think over time, we're going to start to see the rise of the digital social methods that will deliver better results. And so they'll become more commonly used and they will become the norm in the future.
All right. So that's it. That's your position. I want to make sure I don't want to, inundate you with a lot of facts and real content. Anything else you want to add to that, or you want to wait till my post-dissertation response and we'll rumble?
I'll add one final view, and that is, for me personally, I don't answer cold calls. Zero. And I know I'm not alone in that. There's been a lot of content I've seen recently about people Googling numbers that they don't recognize, or, simply just ignoring salespeople. And, I'm not saying I represent everyone. I really don't. but I do think it's going to be a growing trend that people just will shut off from cold callers. So that'll be my piece done.
Okay, so let me go over here. I'm back to me. All right, so where do we want to start off? Okay, so I'm going to deal with a couple things here on the cold calling argument. First off, everybody calls it cold calling, yet if you read all the facts and figures anymore, it's actually not cold calling. It is warm calling. I love a comment from my CEO of VanillaSoft, David Hood, where he says, this is not your father's cold calling anymore. Why does he say that? Because there's a ton of third-party tools out there, data intelligence and analytics tools from companies like ZoomInfo or Discover.org that allow you to get incredibly targeted. For example, one of the things we do here at VanillaSoft is if we sell a sales engagement platform, turning marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads. So natural for us is let's just target people who, for example, are clients of HubSpot or of Pardot or of Marketo or of Acton. All right, so that combined with employee size, combined with how long they've been using the tool, that gives me a ton of information so that I'm not cold calling, I'm warm calling. No such thing as cold calling. Let's get that out of the way, okay? Next thing, I'll quote Lori Richardson. She says, and I'm quoting a number of people, I reached out to Dan, I gotta be honest, I reached out to a lot of thought leaders and said, I'm rumbling with Dan, I want your input. Lori says the phone is the quickest way to convey words, tone, and enthusiasm. And you gotta admit it's true, guys. On social, it can be easily misconstrued. We can go on Jeb Blount, all right? His VP of sales got a cold call from a social selling expert, and their first response was, so if you are so good at social selling, why are you calling me? All right, they didn't have an answer. That's a really important thing, but it's a valid point. So Jeb actually did an experiment. He spent the week calling. He had one of his top reps work social, all right? So at the end of the week, what happened? Jeb had closed 15 new accounts. He'd got payment, and his rep had got nothing, all right? Now, he did weave social into part of his outreach, but it wasn't 100% social. What else do we got here? This is a really interesting point, all right? I'm going to challenge Dan when he says, I don't answer the phone. There's a couple things I want to make here. First off, if that stops you because you don't think it's effective because people like Dan don't answer the phone, you need to understand something, okay? First off, a lack of cold calling success on your part when you tried it and it didn't work for you isn't a reflection on cold calling not working. It's a proof point that you just need better coaching and more training to use the tool right, just like you do for any other channel, including social. How does Dan make his living? Doing training on social. That's a big point. If I didn't have his training, I wouldn't be good on social either. All right, so that's the first part. The second thing, and this is a powerful statement, who typically holds the budget? All right, who has the budget? Who has the authority? Who has the need? Who has the bant? Typically, that's someone like me, all right? Someone who's not 25, someone typically is not 30 years old. Where do they react first? I'll tell you, Dan, just because you don't answer the phone, I don't answer the phone either on the first one if I don't answer it. But I do get my voicemails, and when I see that number pop back up, when I see multiple requests over and over again, I do pick up the phone, and I laugh, and I say, you know what? A for effort. You were persistent. I respect that. How can I help you? So cold calling is not dead. It's warm calling. It works if you use the tool right, and it works better than anything else. That's my position. All right, over to you. Let's go at it.
That was really good, Darryl. I got to admit, some really good points, and very much a lot of respect for you for going out to some of the great names out there. I've seen similar stuff from Jeb about that experiment he did, and I've seen other great experiments. Steve Burton did a great one here in the UK where he got one of his sales reps to make 100 calls a day and send 100 emails a day, and the results were exactly the same. Cold calling generated the numbers. What they called social selling did zero. And my opinion on that is quite simple. It's not proper social selling. I can guarantee you the person that worked for Jeb, I can guarantee you the person who worked for Steve, they weren't doing proper effective social selling. Sending 100 LinkedIn emails isn't effective social selling. So that's one of the points I want to raise from today is I honestly believe social selling and cold calling, they're equal activities. Do them both right, you could generate just as much success from either of them. I've cold called for 10 years. I know how good it is. I know how easy it is to pick up the phone and reach people, but I also know how to do exactly the same with social and deliver the same volume of results. Like you say, it's about learning how to do it properly, getting the right support, coaching, and practicing it and mastering it from that. So I agree. Look, cold calling is alive, but as you say, you don't answer the call, which is great. You then listen to voicemails and perhaps answer in the future. And I know I'm not, age isn't the key thing here, but I do think it's a generational thing. We're in a different world now where social media, instant messaging play a bigger role in it. Now, I don't answer the first cold call, even if they continue to call, even if they leave me. And by the way, the minority of people leave me voicemails, which I think is shocking, and that's probably a separate debate to have.
Which
but even if they do leave voicemails,
training. Yes, I agree. And that blows me away they don't leave voicemails either, because although there's a lot of school thought that says you shouldn't do that, that's wrong. That's an aged approach. I agree with you. Now, I'm going to challenge you a bit here, though, Dan. You said, all right, you did cold calling for 10 years. You know it works. So first off, cold calling isn't dead, because you just heard Dan Disney say here he knows it works. Second part is Dan Disney said to me he does them both and they work equally. And you quoted Steve Burton on that. Yet in the Dan Disney's case, he's got over 300,000 followers. The average Joe doesn't. So are you trying to tell me that someone who's got 1,000 or 1,500 or 500 followers is going to have the same success on social that they could have on cold? That's what I want to know from you.
No, I think that's a fantastic question. I get asked that quite a lot. And honestly, it is not my audience helps me now, but I've been social selling for about 4 years now properly. And I've only had that audience quite recently. It's grown quite a lot over the last year/2 years. The first 2 years that I was using it, selling IT solutions, I had no audience. I had zero personal brand. Through practice and a lot of effort, I was able to still generate great results through it. So yes, I do think the average Joe can generate fantastic results. Beautiful thing about social selling is it's also something that accumulates. So the more you do in it, you're just building more momentum. And like you say, I get to the point now where I have a large audience, a good personal brand. And so it just grows and grows and grows, kind of like an investment.
Okay. We haven't been making the same investments. Okay. So now we're getting some questions from the online chat. I'm going to kind of bring some of these in as we go because they're all related. One of the individuals here wanted us to define what is a cold call. Do you want to take a crack at that, or you want me to go for it?
I'll very quickly give my opinion on a cold call. Now, because you mentioned the warm call thing, there are a lot of companies that are still doing old style cold calls, old cold data, people that they have no idea who you are, you don't know who they are, you've somehow accumulated this data and you're just picking up the phone, you're phoning someone random. Most people don't have names, you don't know if they have any needs, if they use your product or service. It's purely cold calling, and that still happens, I think, in a lot of places. I think what you referred to is obviously warmer modern calling, where, like you say, you can get great insights, and that I do think is kind of where things are heading at the moment. I used a great example in a blog quite recently referring to cold calling as Blockbuster, in the principle that Blockbuster could and should still be alive right now. It just didn't adapt as a business. And if cold calling is going to survive for a bit longer, I think, as you say, it needs to adapt, to use technology, to use AI, to use platforms to be able to enhance it. So yeah, just my views on cold calling.
All right. So for me, a cold call is straightforward. It is an outbound activity done to prospect somebody new you've not talked to before. They don't know you, you don't know them, but you've done some research. They seem to be a logical target for your product or your service. You're picking up the phone, you're dialing them in an attempt to see if there's a possible need there. That's prospecting. My good friend Benjamin Dennehy, who's active on the chat already, and we're going to bring that up shortly, will be the first to say to you, that's prospecting, that's not selling, but cold calling is just that. So to me, yes, it's cold because they've never heard from you before, but it's incredibly warm because you know exactly, if you're doing this right, you know exactly who they are and why they have a need. That implies you know your product. That implies you understand your customer and their pains. And that implies you can actually apply some filters to physically narrow down on who should have that conversation with. And that is no different than you having a conversation with them at a local networking event where you don't know them, but you walk up because they're with a bunch of people that you know, and hence they have common interests, and you start that dialogue. That is a warm call. Now, getting back to Benjamin Dennehy, if you don't know him, the UK's most hated sales trainer. I still love that statement. He's saying to you, you made a quote that 90% won't respond. And his question is, what does that mean won't respond?
Just before we dive into that, Darryl, I think we've lost connection. Have we? I'm seeing a few people on the chat screen scrolling the connection's lost.
I'm seeing that as well. Yet we're streaming here. Everything's showing the streaming here. Let's see what we can do.
We will have a quick look at that, guys. We want to try and get this up and running quickly.
Why don't I flip over to you and you can physically talk to me about your 90%?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And that was a really good definition of sort of cold calling, warm calling. Again, I think cold calling is evolving, and that warm calling is where it integrates with social. That's where they work really well together. So we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the future of cold calling, social selling being a fad. A lot of people know the best approach is to use them both together. Like you say, doing the research or using platforms that do the research through social for you, and then you're able to qualify them and make calls where you know that there should be a need there. They should be qualified. That's what works now. I still stand by my point. The phone as a tool, I do think, doesn't have a strong future. Like I said, I personally don't use it. I know a lot of people from younger generations don't use it. I have 2 kids. My oldest is 12. He has a smartphone now. Certainly doesn't use it to make calls, and he'll text me or WhatsApp me from his bedroom. It's a different type of world that we live in now. We have instant messaging and things like that. So, separate to the whole cold calling piece, the phone as a tool, both for cold outreach, even general communication, I do think has an interesting future ahead.
All right, so if you've lost the connection, folks, and you're still in the chat window, you're probably not hearing this conversation, but in the chat window, they're saying the conversation, the stream is fully functional. We've given a different link. It's a YouTube link. We do stream to multiple channels simultaneously. We don't always advertise the YouTube link, so we apologize about that, but go to the chat window. You will see the YouTube link and just carry on there, and life is grand. So that's good. All right, so wrapping this up, I contend cold calling is not dead, and it's got a big-ass future in front of it because every single one of us, it seems, has one of these. We have a phone. Dan, you differ. Is that a final point of view?
Yeah, look, I agree. More people have phones now than ever before, but I'd probably suggest, and I can't state facts on this, but people use them a lot less for making or receiving calls than they do for checking social media and being active on instant messaging, which is why I think social is the more effective tool, because whilst we all have phones, I don't think we're using it as much as we used to communicate via a phone call.
All right, so let's move on to the next conversation. And the next conversation I get to lead off, social selling isn't selling. This is a point that I strongly contend. I will tell you to your face, you look at it in my LinkedIn comments over and over again, social selling is a misnomer. It is marketing. Let's define what marketing is. Marketing is all about creating awareness, creating demand for your product or your service or yourself. That's marketing. No deal has been consummated. Nothing has been sold. It is marketing. It's not even prospecting. You haven't even had a conversation with them to qualify them. It is marketing. It is social marketing. It is not social selling. It is a word that's been positioned by sales professionals because they think it's another avenue to their quota. But that's not the case, all right? That's the first thing. Now, what's ironic is that Dan Disney has actually been quoted recently on what is social selling. And I want to quote Dan here as he scratches his chin going, what's Darryl going to say? Hopefully I got this right. Marketing is passive prospecting. Prospecting is actively and specifically targeting an individual. It is so, ergo, it is not social selling. Now, I mentioned my good friend Benjamin Dennehy. He shared with me this. Social selling is marketing designed to get people to either place an order or to call you. This is his point of view. If they call you, it's referred to as a prospecting activity. If they merely place an order, you've not sold anything. It's just a transaction. No sales has taken place. If I go to Amazon and I buy this pen, that's a transaction. Nobody had to convince me. I had no qualifications. I self-diagnosed. No sales was involved. Ergo, this is my point of view. Demand and awareness creation is the role of marketing. That's social, plays a perfect role there. It is one channel, just like email is, just like a webinar or a live stream or a video is a channel. That is marketing. When you do outreach, picking up the phone, calling them, that's the start of prospecting. That's the role of the phone. Now you're getting to the point of selling. Sales qualification, now you're selling. All right? It is not social selling. End of story. Dan, you get to respond.
I got to admit, I'm sitting here and my blood is boiling a little bit there, Darryl. You know, this is one of the points that really gets me. And I love Benjamin Denham here. Again, if you're not following him already, guys, please do check him out. He is fantastic. His content's great, and he's a fantastic speaker as well. But separate to that, look, social selling is selling. There is social marketing that exists. That is a real thing. Social marketing is a thing, and it's something that is hugely powerful. But social selling is something different. Now, social sellers will do social marketing activities. But this is one of the things. There's another point we're going to debate in a couple of points' time, which is social selling isn't taken seriously, which is highlighted very much in your points there, Darryl. It's not taken seriously, and social selling can be. And I'm living proof of this as well as many people out there. It can be used to generate inbound through the marketing activities. It does that, which is great. Cold calling can't generate inbound opportunities very effectively, but it can also be used to generate outbound opportunities. And this is why I want it to be seen as equal to cold calling, because you can leverage it to do what cold calling does, and that is start sales conversations. I'm not talking about people coming and clicking a few things and telling you they want to make this order. I'm talking about you finding prospects, and in the same way you would pick up the phone and dial them, you may send them a message or engage some content to start a conversation. You can then take that to an email, to a meeting, whatever it may be. But it is no different to picking up the phone. You're just using the social platform to do so.
All right, so we're going to differ because you just said to me social selling could be used for inbound and outbound. All right, so let's deal with inbound first. That's not selling. That's a lead. That's marketing. When we send out a post that says download this white paper, we could maybe put it on social. We could send it to you as an email, and you go to that landing page, you click through, you give me your information on the form, you hit submit. That's an inbound lead to me. Social generated that lead. Marketing, email generated that lead. Pay-per-click generated that lead. Inbound, marketing, not selling. You cannot convince me otherwise. When I hear a salesperson allude to that as social selling, that tells me they don't understand marketing. There is a reason corporations have a marketing department and a sales department. One generates demand, one qualifies demand. That is not selling. Now, you talk to me about outbound, then I'm assuming you're talking about doing a direct message, perhaps an in-mail. That is as unsolicited as a phone call. And I can tell you, when I get those in-mails unsolicited, I react to them the same way you react to a phone. It actually annoys me like you wouldn't believe. We're connecting on LinkedIn. We're connecting on Facebook. We're to have a relationship. We're to have peers. But you're only viewing me as a transaction. You connected to be transactional so you can try to sell me something. There was no relationship building involved. That outbound activity, that doesn't work for me. Over to you.
Very, very fair point. And look, I agree. I'm not a big fan of emails either. And 60-70% of the messages I get from people trying to sell to me are terrible. And again, that's an education point in the same way that a lot of cold calls are terrible because people have bad scripts or they're not trained properly. Again, a separate point. But you know, one thing I want to highlight is that it can be used not just in mails, but actually LinkedIn messaging. And there are ways to do it. And the reason that I get it, no one wants to be viewed as a transaction. People don't want to be sold to, but they need to buy. And there are lots of things you can do on social in the same way, in the way you have a cold call that you can do to build a relationship and have an effective conversation. Look, I'm living proof of it. I use social. I use LinkedIn messaging very effectively. And not just to sell social selling training, which would be a little bit, you know, it wouldn't be a good example, I think, of social selling success working, but I use it to sell daily sales partnerships, which is advertising packages. You know, it's a totally individual product. And I use LinkedIn messaging very effectively to start those conversations that sometimes progress to a Skype, they sometimes progress to an email or to a face-to-face meeting, sometimes a phone call, but they're quite evenly split. So Yes, it can be used for outbound. Okay, I agree. Inbound, in principle, is a marketing activity, but there is no reason as an offset of what you're doing on social. It's an added bonus if a salesperson can use things like LinkedIn to do outbound activities, and through that also generate inbound leads as well. That's just a double win.
Hey, no one's arguing it's a win. I've never made that argument. But you've not said anything to convince me you've sold a damn thing. What you've convinced me is that you've made interest, no different than my sending an email or doing a pay-per-click ad on a certain piece of white paper. That's social marketing. That's not selling. And I love it because he's biting his tongue, and he started out this off by saying nothing gets me going more than this. So, but I feel like you, Dan, to ratchet it down a little bit. I feel as passionate about this as you feel about it. Part of my passion, just to have context, I don't want to misrepresent. I'm a chief marketing officer. Social is a channel, and when I get an expression of interest on that channel, I flip that over to my sales team, and that's what my vice president of sales expects. And I mark it on my reports. This lead came from pay-per-click. This lead came from social. Here are the conversion rates. So now I know how to spend my money. That's marketing, not selling.
It's a really good point, Darryl. And I think there are a lot of businesses that don't have the luxury of good marketing departments or good marketing heads like yourself. So a lot of salespeople, and throughout the majority of my sales career, I've not had the opportunity to have leads come to me. I've had to do what a lot of salespeople do, and that is everything. That is go out and prospect and create opportunities myself. And that has always been on my shoulders. And I know I share that with a lot of salespeople. And prospecting is ultimately finding prospects for your pipeline, qualifying them, and starting conversations that turn them into opportunities. You do that via cold calling. You get data, you call them, you can create it through that, and you can do that through social as well. It's just they're different platforms to generate opportunities. And I think, a lot of people accept there are different platforms. I've got we're going to do something in a minute about sooner or later you need to use the phone. And this was an example, which I think is timed rightly for now. I'm going to try and hold this to the camera so everyone can see it. This is one of those wonderful mazes where you get a couple of doors that you can go in. One of them leads to the prospect. The others lead to dead ends. Now, you might not be able to see it from the writing. I've drawn that quite quickly. But it's got different doors. One's got social. One's got cold calling, one's got email, one's got video, one's got referral. These are all different methods you can use to engage a prospect. Now, different people respond differently. I don't answer cold calls. Some people do. Some people, that is the right door to go into. Me personally, I'm more likely to respond to social or email. Some people prefer to do referrals. Some people prefer to respond to networking. People are different. What we live in is a time where there are more ways to engage people. Social is one of those ways, as is the phone. Different people respond differently.
Well, the irony here, Dan, is that it appears our YouTube link has gone down too. So I would argue that perhaps social, whether we're doing this on LinkedIn, Vimeo, YouTube, whatnot, it's got some technology challenges. We're going to finish this recording and we're going to send it to our audience and they can watch it on demand. We may lose some of the debate on the banter, but regardless, we're going to have some fun. So with that, we agree to disagree, but I understand where you're coming from. I want to give you full kudos on that. You're a great sport. Now, if I recall, we said we had to go to the next slide, which is sooner or later, you need to use the phone anyway. All right, and I'm going to have the chance to go first on this one. So here is my point of view. All right, so I had a couple things. I reached out to some people. I'm going to come back and ask you a question at the end. I talked to Bob Perkins. Now, if you don't know Bob, he's the head managing director of the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. And his point of view is social and email lets you soften the beachhead. But ultimately, big uppercase letters, you need the phone. Empathy and understanding comes through a phone conversation. You need a phone to advance a relationship and to qualify and close. Now, Jeb Blount, he made an interesting comment. He said social channels enhance, elevate, and sometimes accelerate your prospecting efforts. It should be part of your toolbox, but social selling is not a replacement for focused or deliberate outbound prospecting efforts. Now, I went to HubSpot, all right, marketing automation platform, and they're also CRM. Interesting company, lots of content. They have some stats recently. Almost 6 in 10 buyers want to discuss pricing on the first call. That's qualification. More than half of prospects want a demo on a first call. I don't want to miss out on that, and if I'm on social, I may. 19% of buyers want to connect live during the awareness stage, 60% during the consideration stage, and 20% want to talk live during the decision stage. Sooner or later, I contend you need to use the phone. Over to you.
I agree and I disagree, Darryl. I think, yes, sometimes you do need to use the phone, but there are also a lot of times where you don't need to use the phone. As to my kind of previous example, different people want to use different platforms. So there are some people that I work with and I engage through social. I generate the opportunity through social. I start the conversation through social. And ultimately, I then transform it to the next level. Sometimes that is a phone call. Sometimes it's a Skype call, which I don't think we could really describe as a phone call, because we're now talking about video calls, and that's a totally different game right there. Some want to do a face-to-face meeting. Some just want to keep it between email. Some stay on social. I have some of my customers that I work with, and I'm engaging with them just on Facebook Messenger. That's not a lie. There's nothing made up. That is just how different people like to communicate on different platforms, and I think they each need to be respected individually.
I totally agree with you that, omni-channel is a phrase for a reason. Some want to watch a video, some want to read a white paper, some want to talk to a live person. We're human. We all have our idiosyncrasies and our preferences. I have no problem with that. I will argue that Skype is neither, you made the contention that it's not a phone call. I'll make the contention that it's not social. It is a different vehicle. Ironically, Skype is VoIP and most phone calls are VoIP. So I'm going to debate that one, because either way, even on a Skype call, you're having a live conversation, one-on-one, back and forth, that you're not having on social. So bottom line, even if you acknowledge it's a Skype conversation or it's a phone conversation, that backs my point up that you need to have a live conversation. You have to pick up the phone eventually. Now, you have told me that you have made sales on social without ever picking up the phone. I believe you. But let me ask you this. When it's not a onesie-twosie deal, when you've got a corporation, you've got something saying, I want to train 10, 20, 30, 40 reps, are you picking up the phone?
Sometimes. Sometimes it just goes straight to a meeting. Sometimes I don't need the phone. Sometimes, we'll do everything on social and the messaging will end. Great, let's have this meeting on this date. You come to us. Let's have that conversation. So I agree that, certainly the higher value the deal that you're working on, usually you do need to have some form of face-to-face communication. As we've said, sometimes that does happen over the phone. Sometimes it does happen via email. And more likely, the higher you get, it happens face-to-face, person to person. And I do agree, Skype isn't social. I wouldn't try and argue that it is. I would just want it to be appreciated again as a different platform. It's different to the phone, it's different to social. It's just another one of the many tools that we as salespeople now have to use.
Agreed. But do we have agreement then that unless you're selling a commodity item or something with low risk, that a phone call is required to complete the sale?
Sometimes.
Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll move on to the next one. All right. Dan alluded to this slide. The slide is pretty straightforward. It's social selling isn't taken seriously. What do you think of that, folks? Do you think social selling is or is not taken seriously? Dan, if I recall, you get first crack at this one.
Yeah, do you know what I do? And Darryl, I wonder if I can see a few people on the chat asking whether we're going to reschedule. I don't know if you could probably put a little comment just saying that we'll be sharing the video of this later. I hope everyone can still watch this. And again, apologies that the technology has failed us. Technology is a fickle thing. And again, apologies. I hope everyone does get to watch this afterwards. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to message me, email me. I'm sure Darryl will be the same. We'll be keen to continue this conversation where we can't do it live right now. But yeah. Social is not taken seriously, and a lot of people make the misconception that it's just sharing blogs or following prospects or clicking like, things like that. And social is so much more to that. And I spend a lot of my time training people how to do social selling, and after every session, all the feedback I get is how much their view is widened into the opportunities. And it could be everything from your LinkedIn profile. It could be everything from using social media in other activities you're doing, like networking, like events. It can be the content that you do. It can be sending messages. There are so many layers to using social effectively that when it's done properly, it is a very powerful tool. And I think the reason this debate has caused a lot of confusion and anger and frustration, for me, it's never been cold calling versus social selling. Using them together is what works now. And we're talking separately about the future of the phone and things like that. But I want social selling to be fully understood for what it is, because like I said, people are on social media a lot. For a lot of people, it's the first thing they check in the morning. For a lot of people, it's the last thing they check at night. And for a lot of people, it's the thing they check every 5 minutes throughout the day in between. We use it a lot, and we can debate whether that's good or bad. That's a separate conversation to have. But the reality is we're using it a lot. And as a salesperson, the majority of your customers, chances are they are on social media in some form. And I don't know about you, but as a salesperson, I'm passionate about finding as many prospects as possible, helping as many people as possible. And I can see social media as a great platform to help me do that.
All right, so I'm going to open it up by saying I agree with you. Social selling isn't taken seriously, and that's wrong. All right?
Thank you.
And now, but I am going to come back because it's, I'm a bit of a contrarian. So the first thing I would say, and this was brought up in the comments, as this event got more and more hype and more interest, and the registration numbers just started going boom, 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 like through the roof nuts. Way beyond what, once Dan and I had the discussion to do this, way beyond what we expected. It tells you it's a topical issue. So that couldn't have happened without the power of social. And it should be taken seriously, hence social marketing, right? You're creating demand, creating awareness. See what I'm doing there, Dan? Going back full circle. But with that said, there is a reason why it's not taken seriously in some circles, and it is a legitimate reason. There are many social advocates out there, Dan, I'm not suggesting you, but perhaps some of your peers in the industry, who will make bold, stupid statements that the phone is dead and everything is social and you should only use social. And there are young, impressionable sales reps who are taking that advice and missing their numbers because they're relying solely on the social. Again, I love this quote from Jeb. If you decide to buy into this crap, not my word, you might want to keep your resume warmed up. If you think social selling is the new magic fairy dust that will turn you into the next sales superstar, then you are in for a rude awakening. But he goes on, full context, it will not solve your pipeline woes or provide an endless stream of inbound leads with little effort. It takes more than a LinkedIn connection, content curation, and hope to move today's buyer to take action. Now, that was his. Now, Jay Bear, if you don't know Jay Bear, he's with Convince and Convert. So he's the marketing side, right? So Jeb's the sales side. Here's the marketer saying, currently, most social selling tactics for sales representatives are manual. They spend time trying to identify the right leads in social channels, assessing if they're a qualified lead, and then engaging with them. They think sell first and act on social second. And that's a backwards tactic. In other words, what he's implying is social first, sell second. It's called social selling, and I love this point, and this is my biggest thing. This goes back to my beef about the transactional nature of InMail. It's called social selling because it's about connecting socially first, as you would during a trade show, a dinner meeting, or at the bar, and selling second. So, long-winded answer, my way of saying, those who use social selling to physically rely solely on it without being relational, without investing the time, without viewing it in its proper role in the sales process, inbound, awareness, influence, they're fools. And it's reps like that, it's conversations like that that give it a bad name and why many people don't take it seriously.
No, again, thank you for agreeing that it's sort of misunderstood. And I think you make a really good point. But on equal footing, there are cold calling experts. And look, I have nothing but respect for Jeb Blunt and, a lot of the other peers out there. But their hashtag one more call is, again, misleading because, and I see they put out a lot of content on the other side of the spectrum suggesting that people should just use the phone. And you're right. Look, we know, meet in the middle, use them both. That's your ultimate strategy for success. I think we need to accept they are both equal activities. I run my businesses purely through social. There is no cold calling. I may use the phone at some point further down the line, but that's not cold calling. I do not pick up the phone and make cold calls. And I know a lot of businesses out there, a lot of salespeople that can fill their pipeline, smash their targets without making cold calls. Just as there are salespeople out there who can do exactly the same, just making cold calls and not using social. They are both equally strong prospecting, selling platforms. Used together, obviously, you're able to reach more people, but they are equal to each other. And like you said, the ultimate strategy is use them together. But there is too much out there suggesting it's not a good sales activity, and I can promise you it is. It's just about how you use it. We know how to cold call because we've been doing it for such a long time. The reality is using social effectively is still a relatively new function, proven by the fact that so many people don't understand all the ways you can use it. In time, I think we'll start to see it become a much bigger part of the sales process across all industries out there. So yeah, again, just a few thoughts on it.
So you and I had a conversation again yesterday. We were testing this up. I don't think you'll have a problem with me sharing this, but tell me if you do. You can tell me after I share it. I said, dude, I got to ask you a question, a serious question. And me as a marketer, I want to know the answer to this question. Basically, I'm just getting free advice from the great Dan Disney. I said, you've got 300,000 followers. I said, now there's other individuals out there who are equally as prolific and as engaging as you are, but they don't have 300,000 followers. And your response, tell me if I got this wrong, Dan, was, well, I said, what do you attribute that to? And you said, approximately 2.5 years of regular content creation, distribution, video, multi-channel, just 2.5 years of sweat equity and a commitment to my craft. Is that a fair statement?
That is. I love the term sweat equity. That's the first time I've heard it, but yes, 100%. A lot of hard work, consistently, good content on a consistent basis is pretty much the simplest core of my following, in my opinion.
And I would agree with you. And what you represent to me is that classic flywheels. In the book, Good to Great, the idea of the flywheel is it takes a lot of effort to get that wheel turning, but then the more you turn it, it goes faster and faster and faster and faster with less and less and less work because it's got momentum. I will posit that you have 2.5 years and 300,000 followers of momentum, which is why you don't have to use the phone, that the deals come to you. I worry because so many young SDRs or people looking for that magic pixie dust cure to hit their quotas look at people like you and say, if it worked for Dan, it'll work for me. And then they miss the numbers and they explain to the boss, well, I bet on social. And the boss says, you were a moron. That's my worry. That's my worry.
Just to balance that argument, I can use an example that's just come to the top of my head. I know a lady who set up a business this year. She has a very small personal brand, a small audience, tiny audience, and her business, she's got 3 people working for her or alongside her. Her business has thrived this year purely on social, and I'll dig in and actually create a case study from it to share perhaps how she's done that. But it can be done without 2.5 years of sweat equity and 300,000 followers. It can be done in the same way that it can be done with just the phone. Again, I think it's about knowing, practicing, mastering those tools. You can then use them effectively. There are people out there that make hundreds of cold calls every day and miss target because they're not doing it well. Just as there are people out there that you say, bet on social and miss target because they're not doing it effectively. Again, it's about doing it right. You can do both effectively and hit those numbers. But there are just as many people putting their bets on cold calling, making hundreds of cold calls and hitting zero.
You're brilliant. You're right. I totally agree with you. And that's a problem. And we open that up by me saying you simply need more training. And those who think otherwise are wrong. They need better coaching, better training, because it's a tool, it's a skill, it's a craft like any other tactic that you need to improve and get better at. Moving on. Rubber hits the road. Do I go first in this one? No, you go first in this one. Who goes first in this one?
I don't mind. We should flip a coin. I don't have a coin. I'll happily take it.
I'm going to let you go first because I'm just Canadian and I'm nice. Which closes more deals?
Well, I'll tell you what, I put one note on this. ultimately neither close deals because they're prospecting activities. You don't use cold calling to close deals. You don't really use social to close deals. You can potentially a little bit, but as prospecting activities, it's not designed to close deals. It's there to generate deals. What I would suggest, if you were to look at which generates the most pipeline at the moment, and I can't remember who it was, it may have been Jeb, it may have been Anthony Iannarino. Someone wrote quite recently that most pipelines are filled by cold calling at the moment, which I would agree with, but only because it's what most people are used to doing. Most people drive petrol or diesel cars because that's what we've been doing for so long. We know electric is better. We know it's better for the world. It's better for so many reasons, but it's going to take time before the entire population will majority be driving electric cars. And I think it's the same for social. Look, cold calling works, but it's an old activity. I think we're going to see the percentages sort of balance out and potentially social and digital rise above it in the coming years.
I love how you got the little slam in there. It's an old activity. I'm feeling slighted here, my good friend, but it may be an old activity, but that's because it's an effective activity. If I have one tool in my belt that I can use to close more deals, it will be the phone. I will accept your statement that cold calling, like social selling, neither close deals, because that's a fair point. That unless again it's a transaction, in which case, there you go. But what's the right tool to bring a real deal that that you have to overcome objections and everything else across the finish line? Give me a phone every time. I read a study the other day and I cannot find it again. So full disclaimer here, I could be wrong, but my memory said that there was a big social advocacy firm all on the social media. They generated 7 times more business via the phone than they did on social. So that was the first thing. And I will contend that Daniel's a bit of an anomaly. I don't, as much as I love this guy, I wouldn't use him as a role model because he's one man. He is like Madonna or Cher or, I can go on, Kanye. So Drake, everybody, I should just call him Disney. He's that individual persona that people know who they are and they want to be with them. But like on a lot of these firms, they're numerous people, right? There's a whole bunch of people, and some are better than others. Some have better brand recognition than others. And I think that's representative of many sales teams. So therefore, the phone, in their case, 7 times more effective. Now, what was interesting here was this. I equate social to email. It warms a prospect. The phone, in the end, closes the deal. So I'll give an example why I say this, and this is huge. When I pick up a phone and I talk to an individual, a couple things happen. First off, if I'm cold calling, hello, are you there? You qualify them. You have a conversation. There is an expression of interest. I now get to steer the conversation. I get to frame needs that reflect my product, my offerings, strengths, and my competitors' weakness. I get to influence the buying cycle. Even if they go to a bake-off, I've strongly influenced it. I can't do that on social because they're on social. They've already gone public. And they've said, hey, guys, anybody know who's got a great sales engagement platform? What's been your experiences? And they have this just noise of opinions, and they're just opinions. On the phone, I shape the deal. I control the deal. I discern who are all the influencers within the corporation on the deal. That's done on the phone. Therefore, I can close the deal on the phone. I'll quote Grant Cardone. I'm not necessarily a big fan of Grant Cardone. He's a little abrasive for me, but he can't deny success. He says the phone is more powerful than social media. At some point, you will use the phone, keywords at some point, to reach the right person, close a sale, do a follow-up, etc. The phone is money, and everyone has one. So, my money, what closes more deals? It's the phone.
John, I think that's a fair point. And again, I think we've identified the fact that the phone as a tool is good along different stages of the sales process. Prospecting is different. And I think some point we need to do some form of physical live or some form of activity that pits them as a prospecting activity to see which builds more pipeline. That would be an interesting one to look at. If you had good social sellers, good cold callings, who could build the biggest pipeline over a period of a month, 3 months, whatever you wanted to do, what would build the best pipeline? Because that's where the real social selling, cold calling probably competes properly. When you talk about the phone, you talk about progressing conversations, overcoming objections. The phone is a good tool for that, just as face-to-face. Email to an extent for a lot of people. Some people prefer to do the objections and overcome them via email. They're just different communication platforms. The phone is very viable. So yeah, I think the phone has its place, but when we're looking at cold calling and social selling, the ultimate way to demonstrate which is better is which builds the biggest pipeline, because that's what they are, prospecting activities. And just for Benjamin, who's watching, prospecting is a sales activity.
Benjamin and I have that discussion too. So you make me laugh on that one. All right. In the essence of time, we'll bring this down to the final bonus conversation. And this is more of a positioning. We're not going to debate this too much because I want to make sure we're in and out within our 1 hour. The question was, close this on why your tactic is better. So I think I'll go first and let my good friend Dan have the last word. How's that? So here's what I think the phone cold calling is much better than social marketing, not social selling. Number one, influence. All right. The phone, you can engage without any competition in the conversation. On social, that's not the case. You frame the conversation, you frame the requirements, you influence it. On social, it's totally public. You have minimal influence on those requirements, and you're at the mercy of individuals like a Dan Disney who have better brand and better relationship with influencers. So you're already, for most of us, starting behind the 8 ball. So from influence, phone wins. From intelligence, what intelligence gathering? The phone, I can use tools like Discover.org, Zoom Info. I can use LinkedIn Navigator. I can create an MQL-ready, warm calling list. My conversations are targeted. On social, well, I can follow influencers. I can target specific accounts. So can everybody else. And it gets worse as you get more followers, because as you get more followers, you're Dan. Do you know what his inbox is like? Do you know what his messaging is like? He has got noise up the wazoo. And how does he distill that? More and more noise. So from intelligence, the phone again. Time to results. The phone, it's immediate, all right? And it improves with every follow-on phone call, all right? You can actually, it's not a cold call. It's not just one call. It's the subsequent call. And Connect and Sell has done a ton of stats that show it's those subsequent phone calls where your conversion rates just skyrocket. So that's about time to results. On social, it takes a long time to build that brand. We've already talked about that. It's at the expense of your chasing business on the phone or other channels and impacting your quota efforts. You need to constantly be following that dialogue, and there's 1,000 conversations going on simultaneously. And candidly, that makes it really, really hard. I'm going to quote my good friend Mark Hunter here on your personal time required. Social selling is a time sucker. There are short term, there's going to be little results. It takes time away from your current sales strategy and execution. And just a reminder from Mark Hunter, cold calling is not cold, it's warm. It's not a sweatshop. Prospects typically know of your offering when you call them. There's a rapid recognition there. My last point, follow the sales experts. These are the experts that are about making money and driving revenue. Trish Bertuzzi, Mark Hunter, Lori Richardson, Jeb Blunt, Dan Cardone. I could go on. What's their ratio of social to calling? I'm going to tell you, if you don't know, whilst they are on social, they are all over the phone. That's where they make their money. My good friend Dan, over to you.
Very, very well played, sir. That was a very, very good closing statement. I'm going to highlight, first of all, before I dig into some of my key points, but all those people that you've mentioned, they're traditional selling trainers. So that's why they push it. That's all they know. They come from the time where the phone was king, and that's all you had to communicate with people. And that's not the case now. So whilst I respect that the phone works, it worked for them years ago, and it can work now. Will it work in the future as effectively? I really don't think so. We're in a different communication age now, and it's going to be younger, or not necessarily younger, I don't want to bring age into this, but digital savvy salespeople that can leverage multi-platforms effectively. Those are going to be the ones over the coming 5 to 10 years that will sit up there and tell you that the phone isn't where you should put all your money, but actually it's the digital platforms that you should do so. Now, I want to bring in 2 quick statistics. One is 90% of decision makers won't answer or respond to cold calls, which came from Inside View, I think it was. And the other is that 75% of B2B buyers use social for purchasing. So if I'm looking at something saying that, well, only 10% of decision makers I'll probably be able to reach through cold calling, or the fact that 75% of buyers are actually using social within the buying process, I'm looking at something that holds the potential to yield far, far greater results. The only thing that's stopping that at the moment is, as we've kind of discussed, lack of understanding, training, support, etc., the resources to do so. You mentioned very briefly around sales enablement tools out there and warm calls and stuff, which they're massively amazing. And I think what we're going to see over the coming years are a lot more social enablement tools when we start to get access to those social platforms and we can start to take that data and use it in a software format or artificial intelligence format. That's where it really is going to become a much more powerful tool for us. So in my opinion, I do think social holds the potential to be a lot better when done right. I think it can be a lot more effective than cold calling. Yes, there are a lot of experts out there that support it, but a lot of those experts come from a time where there was only the phone or perhaps the phone and email. We're now in a time where you've got the phone, email, you've got social media, you've got things like video. And here's a very quick insight. I'm just going to curve in because it's not all social. There is a great B2B demand generation agency here in the UK. And I saw one of their founders speak at an event quite recently, and they realized that cold calling as their sole activity was dipping in its results. And as a B2B demand generation agency, that's what they do. So they started to use a cadence of multiple things, including social. But it was video that really stood out. And what they found was video was performing 8 times more effective. It was delivering 8 times more results than cold calling. So it's not all social, but there are new platforms that are starting to generate far better. We live in a new age, and I think it's time for everyone to start to adapt and evolve with that.
All right, so I'm not going to debate you. I thought I'll have the last word. You have the last word. That was a great debate. How'd that go, lad?
I really enjoyed it.
It's much more fun here because on this medium, you can really get back and forth into it, just like you can on a phone call. With that, folks,
touche.
Tell us who won. We'll send you the results. So we started off with question number 1. Here's question number 2. Go to bit.ly/poll-q-2. Tell us who won, and we'll be able to compare and contrast who you thought was going to win versus who you thought won. But I think today the winners are everybody because we had a chance to get to know you. You got a chance to get to know us other than on the phone or out in social. Video is wonderful, as Dan said. I fully agree with him. And we're going to leave you with a parting gift, so stay tuned here. Before I do that, any parting comments or words, Dan, for our audience?
No, I want to say thank you to everyone who registered and everyone who did try to tune in. Apologies for some of the technical issues. I do hope you'll get all of the content and the video and you enjoy it when you watch it. And please do reach out because I would love to know what you think. Again, I hope there was some content in here that helped salespeople and started to slightly clear some of the confusion in this space. I think we both agree that they're both effective platforms. You should use them together and do what works for you ultimately.
Dan, if they need to follow you because they're not already for whatever reason, what's the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn. I spend the majority of my time in social space on LinkedIn. So yeah, please do connect with me, follow me. That's probably the best place.
And I'm assuming you have a website, I believe thedailysales.net. Is that correct?
I have the dailysales.net, and in current construction, danieldisney.net should be ready within the next sort of month or so. But it's live now, so you can go on it and start to see as it progresses.
Look at you move from the corporate brand to the personal brand. That's what social's all about. Well done.
Living example.
There you go. And as for myself, I am Darryl Praill. You can find me on Twitter as Opinionated. Go figure after today's conversation. Let me spell that for you. It's OHPIN. ION, the number 8, TED. It's a tough spelling, but it's mine, baby. Opinionated. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, please follow me there. I'm active there all the time. I, unlike Daniel, who's with The Daily Sales, I am with VanillaSoft, and we are the industry's most established and most successful sales engagement platform. You can learn more at vanillasoft.com. So that's that little infomercial. And I'm going to say goodbye to my good friend Daniel here. And I'm going to close it with our extra, where I'm going to tell everybody that you can physically go to info.vanillasoft.com/Darryl. takedown. info.vanillasoft.com/takedown. And you will get free content from Daniel, who gives you over 100 social selling tips, and from VanillaSoft, where we give you a massive study on around how to optimize your engagement based on millions upon millions upon millions, in fact, over 130 million sales interactions. So that's the takeaway. This has been fun. It's been a rumble. We've got a takedown. Go vote. Tell us who won. In the meantime, folks, go to thedailysales.net. Go to danieldisney.net. Go to vanillasoft.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on Twitter. In the meantime, we will talk to you soon.